Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? How many of you were with us yesterday for the alumni conference? Yeah, no, that was the best one we've had. We're expecting more of the same today, but just a little bigger. But thank you all for showing up. This is a day of gratitude for us at LBAN, and I think, for our community in general. Despite some of the challenges that are out there in the world, coming together like this, we should always be grateful for these kinds of spaces. I did want to highlight a couple of our ecosystem partners. There's too many for us to mention. A lot of you are here in the room, some couldn't make it. A lot of the work that we do is to build a community for entrepreneurs across our country, and we rely on partnerships. Some of the key partners that have been with us the longest are we would call them our lead partners, are Wells Fargo. We have with us Luis Gonzalez, Ruben Barales, and several others from Wells Fargo. Without them, we probably would not have existed. They bet early on us, and we're very grateful for their support. But another very long partnership has been with Bank of America. Raquel Gonzalez is here with us, Carlos Galdames, and Jimena Delgado. We've had the opportunity to get to know many people across the country from all of these partners. They always show up in the right way for us. And it's particularly because of these connections that we've had with people like Raquel, who really know how to communicate what we're trying to do across their institution. We think that matters a lot because then that institution shows up the right way for us and others like us. With Chase, it's probably the newest of our large partners, but has become one of our deepest relationships. We work with Chase across many, many different parts of their business, in particular the Startup Accelerator, which has been a crucial addition to our programming. We've had since the beginning a business scaling program. With their support, we were able to add a Startup Accelerator, which has allowed us to reach a lot more Latinos. You'll hear in our research why that matters for our community in particular. But I did want to just acknowledge a few people who come here from Chase. So Silvana Montenegro, as well as William Jaramillo. And then you'll be hearing from Carolina Giannicelli later. She'll be on the stage. But there's many more that are here from that organization. And similarly, we connect with them across the country. And then the last of the big four that have been with us for the longest is Cerna Foundation. So this is a foundation that has been focused on inclusive economy building. And I would say of all of our partners, that's the one that has influenced the most how we show up. So when you enjoy getting together, convening, the way our messaging hits, it's because of what we learned through our engagement with them about how to do proper outreach, how to proper engagement without being exploitative or taking advantage of the different challenges that people are having to overcome, and instead try to focus on how do we change the systems that are causing those inequalities in order to create a bigger economy for everyone. So glad to have Don Chen, their CEO, with us here today. We'll have a panel talking about philanthropy's impact on entrepreneurship. And on that panel, there'll be one of them in the afternoon. I would recommend it highly for anyone who's interested. I also want to recognize the one institution that has really made the biggest difference for us. In fact, Stanford and LBAN have been joined since the very beginning. We were founded by Professor Jerry Porras about 14, 15 years ago. Without his vision for creating this organization called LBAN to leverage the greatness that exists in this institution, LBAN wouldn't exist, all of this wouldn't exist. He could see then the potential in our community and the big reason for Stanford to have a connection to us. Stanford right now, in particular the business school, is the #1 business school on the planet. They lead in research around business. They lead in teaching around business. Anywhere in the world, Stanford Business School will be recognized as the default leader. He wanted to push that out much more broadly to our community across the country and to many others. That's kind of a hard thing to sell 15 years ago when people look at Latinos as a small minority. But he could see the future that without Stanford having a connection to us, it can't remain the leading institution. Because Latinos are that big and that important that Stanford has to have a connection to us. Obviously, the reverse is also true, right? For us, for myself, for many of us who had the privilege and the luck to be able to attend Stanford, we also recognize the value for us to be here. That this could become our space, that this has to be a space for us. And so all of that is wrapped up in why LBAN exists, but a big credit to Professor Porras. If you get a chance, he's here with us. Why don't we just give him a shout out? So we do three things with Stanford. The first one is research. And so with that, there's, within the university, within the Graduate School of Business, there's the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies led by Deb Whitman. We have partnered with them, collaborating on building out this research. Every year we do extensive research on Latinos. And then we work with faculty here and a researcher dedicated to us at Stanford. And we publish a report. You'll be hearing about that report today, but we also organize this event. So again, they're very involved with us in creating this space for all of you and the research. The research for us has always been critical. It is an area where Stanford leads, but it's also an area where there's very little information about the big impact that Latinos are having and the challenges that they're facing. We wanted to tell the truth about who we are. And with that research, it really helps us frame the better narrative about the contribution that our community is making to this country. The other thing that we focus on that's really big for us is, I mentioned these two programs. We have an accelerator and a business scaling program. And these have a different focus, but very similar 9-week programs that are here at Stanford. People who complete the program will have a certificate from the Graduate School of Business. We've created the programs with collaboration from the university, and all the faculty in the program are from the Graduate School of Business. So there's been a strong partnership with the School of Executive Education within the Graduate School of Business to create these programs, and every year we execute 3 of these. If you're a founder, a business owner, and you have any interest in these programs, please come talk to us. If you know people who should be in these programs, please let them know. We're a nonprofit, so we can't reach everyone, but we want to make sure that we are truly representing the fullness of our country. So the way we look at it, good people know good people. All of you are part of us. You're good people, and if you find us more, then we will gladly consider them for our programs. The third thing that we do is, and I should mention, I'm not sure if she's here, but within the executive education program, who works on these 2 programs with us, Rania Halil has been the key partner. I don't think she can make it this morning, but without her, we could not make these programs happen. So I just want to mention that. Very deep relationship with her over the years in developing and executing these programs. I think some of you will be in the next 2 cohorts that are going to kick off on Friday. I think Friday you all will be back with us for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you might meet her. She's usually bouncing around during that time. But the third thing that we do is we're building this ecosystem. This room here is a manifestation of that. But we do a lot of work around the country with our partners to create spaces for entrepreneurs and anyone related to the entrepreneurial community. We want to build a better ecosystem. We'll talk more about that, but the the basic premise around that is that our community is very strong. We're very entrepreneurial, but sometimes the ecosystem doesn't work for us. And it doesn't work for other people as effectively as it should. And our goal with doing this kind of ecosystem building is to build a better ecosystem. The other thing that I want to mention is when I drive onto campus, it's always uplifting. It's always a hopeful place. For me, some of you might know my background. I'm a child immigrant, worked in the fields at 10, experienced extreme poverty, racial resentment, violence in my schools, in the neighborhoods. It was a challenging space. Stanford changed all of that for me. This campus still seems brighter, even when the world outside is darker. I flourish here because of the spaces that sustain me. Spaces like Casa Zapata, Ujama House, El Centro Chicano. These places allowed me to experience an environment where I had never seen before. It was Latinos and Black students that were going to shape the future. All around me, acting naturally, doing what you do. I lived with them, among them. And in all those day-to-day interactions, I could begin to see a better future for myself, but also for our country. And that's in part why we're here today. There is still many of our people and others that don't get a chance to experience the full promise of our country. Our hope is to do something about that. Even though things right now, when you consider the moment, if you're a Latino, an immigrant, or any other kind of person that doesn't quite always fit in, this is a more difficult time. It's not a secure moment. That is the reality right now. Sometimes showing up fully can feel almost as if you're in defiance, just being who you are. When I consider, it's how important it is to have representation that affirms you. How did you all feel when you saw Bad Bunny take one of the biggest stages? So instead of leading with our economic power, which he could have, we're $4.1 trillion, the fifth largest economy on the planet. That's who Latinos are right now. We are creating more companies faster than any other group. We're growing revenues faster than other groups. We're creating jobs at twice the rate, jobs that have better benefits across the board. But instead, all that is true. Instead, he focused on our humanity and our dignity. And he centered our culture. And in that, he reminded us of our superpower. We are builders and we build strong communities. That's who Latinos are. It mattered that he did that he showed up in that way, and it matters how we show up now. As you proceed through the day, you're going to hear a lot of data, you're going to hear a lot of information. You will learn from that, you'll learn from each other. I also want you to consider to see yourself as that ecosystem. We know sometimes we have to work harder, and that's not right. We know sometimes we get told no when we should have gotten a yes. That is the reality, but we can build a better one amongst ourselves. There's bankers in the room, VCs, angel investors, entrepreneurs. All of us make choices of who we accept and who we don't. All of us have the power to show up in that way. And the one thing that I would admonish and ask of all of us, when we do enter these spaces, they're precious. Treat them that way. Think about what you can contribute to make it a better space for someone else, not the other way around. Not what can you take from this. If all of us are contributing to someone in the room, all of us will get more out of this. So with that, I want to just express my gratitude. I think here in the room, we will be building that better society, that better future. And I want to thank all of you for being a part of it, as well as, again, just welcome you. This is our 11th time doing this. Every time it's better. We appreciate you showing up. It's, you can imagine from our position, we put all this work into it, we throw a party, and then what if no one showed up? But we knew a lot of you were going to be here because yesterday was pretty packed. So thank you again. At this point, I did want to transition to the next speaker. He'll speak on behalf of the university. He is a fellow Stanford alumni. He did many things after that in service of the university. Most particularly, he is a trustee emeritus of Stanford University. With that, let me ask my friend, Stanford trustee emeritus, LBAN chairman, Victor Arias.
How are you all? Everything good? Órale, let's go. Arturo, you're just a phenomenal leader, and you have a great story. We all have stories, but we have to remind each other of all our stories because together they weave a real understanding of what it takes to be Latinos. So I welcome everybody here in person and online. This is our 11th annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship event, and we are here at our university, at your university, Stanford. When Jane Stanford and her husband, Senator Leland Stanford, founded Stanford in 1891, it was named after their son Leland Jr., who had passed away at a very young age. They were very committed to educational excellence and, most importantly, the inclusive nature, which in 1890 was around including women. Jane's vision was very clear that everyone has something to contribute to the creation of knowledge and the well-being of society. She wanted to educate the children of California. That was her statement. And it sounds like we could use a leader like Jane Stanford in today's world. So I'm here in my different roles, but really I'm here to help you, to welcome you on behalf of this great university. But on behalf of our president, John Levin, who will be here later, you'll hear from him later, Provost Jenny Martinez, and the Board of Trustees Chair Lily Serafan. I have the privilege of being a Stanford alum, and my greatest privilege, as Arturo mentioned, was to have served on the Board of Trustees for 10 years. We have support from the administration, but also trustees past and present, and that would include Jose Feliciano, Marisa Brutico, and also one that's standing here, and I want to recognize him, Michael Camuñez. And also past trustees like Luis Nogales, Ellen Ochoa, Fred Alvarez, and Miriam Rivera, who will also be here this afternoon. So we have tremendous support from past and present leaders. Stanford has a legacy of providing world-class environment that is colorblind and multilingual. And we also have great support here at the business school by Dean Sarah Sewell, who is on the East Coast and couldn't be with us today. But also we have the GSB director of the Center of Entrepreneurial Studies, Deb Whitman, who's right there. Raise your hand, Deb. Thank you, Deb. And we have been guided selflessly as well by Professor George Foster as our faculty sponsor, you'll hear from him in a second. So just the many people that are helping and providing support for this initiative just helps to create more of that knowledge that Jane Stanford envisioned. This strong foundation will carry us through these very difficult times. Deportations, ICE, racial profiling, promotion of fear, etc. It goes on and on. And let's not kid ourselves. These are direct attacks on Latinos. We cannot sugarcoat it. We could have folded up our tents and faded into the background, but no. As Latinos, we've been through very difficult times, whether it's ourselves or our antecedentes. And so, we have a resilience gene that is very strong. So let's not forget, we all have served this country well as the most decorated group for valor. We're very present, yeah, that's a good one. We were very present during 9/11 and the rebuilding of this country. During the pandemic, Latinos led the way for those essential, necessary services during the lockdown. And who creates the most small businesses in this country and drives the U.S. economy? Who? You. We do. So we must keep our focus on continuing to scale these small businesses and to create wealth for our entrepreneurs, who in turn reinvest that in our communities and our country, and to hire all types of American workers, and in turn develop foundational leadership for this country. Be proud of what you bring, whether it's drive, innovation, ganas, and language. Matter of fact, I signed an executive order making Spanish the official language of these proceedings. But we will respect English speakers. So I'm so grateful to you, many old faces, many new ones as well, my fellow board member, Phil Pompa, over there, and also who's already been recognized, Jerry Porras. He's an emeritus professor at the business school. He created the vision for what we are seeing here today, and his mantra of do business with each other and get business for each other. It resonates loudly today, so thank you again, Jerry, for everything that you do and you are. And I have to take a moment to recognize our incredible team with Arturo, Jennifer, Elian, Marianne, Alejandra, Anelisa, Carlos, Juliana, and our ACE researcher, Rosalia. A round of applause for this great team here. So on behalf of Stanford University, it is my privilege to officially welcome you to the 11th State of Latino Entrepreneurship Summit. Bienvenidos. We have Professor Foster, you're going to come up and give some remarks then about the research. Thank you. George Foster.
Okay, so welcome to all here. It's just a real privilege to be up the front speaking to you. And we'll see the President John Levin later. But on behalf of the Provo and Dean of the Business School, and also Deb Whitman, who heads up our Center for Entrepreneurial Research. The CES project, the LBAN comes out of the CES area. This is an area that was set up 30 years ago to transform the way education is done in terms of entrepreneurship. Obviously, being in Silicon Valley was a huge advantage for us, but that's just an advantage. It's not an asset until you exploit it. And I think what Deb has been able to do in that area is really make that the showcase for entrepreneurial research and case writing in the whole curriculum. And you sort of look at the programs that our students do here, there are more entrepreneurial courses than any other area at the GSB. And that gives us leverage in terms of what we can feed into the LBAN programs, the two programs we run it, in terms of the accelerator and the second program. So I just want to acknowledge those people. I think part of what LBAN's being able to bring to the business school, and this gets to the comment, what can you do for us as well as what we can do for you, is that certainly in the way we do teaching and the cases we write have been influenced by certainly my research dealing with LBAN in terms of written cases literally out of the LBAN groups that I've dealt with. I also, one of the classes I teach does a program on La Manaca, which is a Mexican bakery. Two of our MBAs came here from Monterey, and what was interesting is that one was going to go to the leading marketing firm in the world, the other was going to go to a leading bank in the world, and they decided in their last quarter that what they were going to do is set up a chain of Mexican bakeries. And their parents had actually subsidizes their program at Monterey Institute of Technology in the business school. So one of them went to his dad and he said, I'm going to not go to the bank, I'm going to set up a chain of Mexican bakeries in LA. And his father says, I think there was a cheaper way of getting to that end. But they've been incredibly successful. It's a multi-chain thing in LA, and now they're selling through Costco and stuff like that. And what the students love is every time they fly up from Los Angeles, they bring a whole lot of cookies for the class. So that's sort of one of the really hits in terms of that. But just in terms of what Atira was mentioning, they also talked about the challenges that they were facing in the last 12 months in terms of people coming to the store and stuff like that. And that was really important for the MBA classrooms, because it's one thing to see it on television, it's another thing to see the people presenting the case to the class and talking about how sales have dropped off 20% or something like that in the last 6 months because people are not feeling as comfortable going to the store. And I think that's the sort of, it takes hard lessons to get to the point that this stuff is real. It's not sort of just something on CNN or MSNBC or something like that. My insights into the community are sort of multiple. I'm godfather to El Salvadorian-based family who I've known for ages, and I was just in Austin. Every time I go to Austin, I go to dinner with them on that. And so the grandmother, who's I'm closest to on that, she came through El Salvador as one of 10 kids, and obviously it was a rough time when she went through, and so she has a lot of education to me in terms of the challenges of leaving El Salvador and coming to here. The other insight I've got is I've been mentoring a boy for about 8 years whose mother is Mexican. He was born here, but he's got deep Latino heritage. And it's sort of where I saw this just recently is that when Dominico was playing the US team in the baseball, and Venezuela was playing the US team in baseball, I said, I know who you're barracking for, Jose. And also, he always, I take him to the soccer whenever a Mexican team here, and he's also always got his Mexican jersey on that. So it's sort of just an insight into, although he was born at Stanford Hospital, his mother came across the border and went back. He hasn't forgotten his roots at all. And I think that's important, that you're living in the two communities and giving to both on that. Just in terms of the report itself, each year we start off thinking about what are we going to do different, what are we going to innovate in the report, so that we've got something, not just, let's just turn the dial one more time. This time we decided we would add some qualitative responses to the survey in terms of not just tick the boxes, but what are some of the real challenges that you're facing, and give us it in your words. And I think it's really important when you're getting information from entrepreneurs to not give them tick this box or tick that box, because you don't get insight into their own individual challenges, because they're not all homogeneous. And so I've been chairman of the World Economic Forum Committee on Global Agenda Council and written multiple reports for the forum on entrepreneurship. And I've always insisted, and each time we do a report, you do actual cases on the companies, interview the entrepreneurs, so that you really sort of feel their highs and lows and those type of things, which is part of what you're trying to do. And this is a program we put through both programs. It's a challenge in entrepreneurship. It's not easy. It's not anything that people go in there anticipating all the highs and lows on that. And a lot of times they say, had I known then, had I known now what I thought I knew at the start, I'm not sure the path I would have chosen. And yet there's an inherent optimism in entrepreneurs that's necessary to go through. And I just think, but it's got to be grounded optimism. And I think that's part of what the programs we're trying to do here is get grounded reality in terms of what you do, because that way you better allocate your resources and you understand the really pivotal role of people in these organizations. With that, the innovations that we're trying to do, and this one is a qualitative, and also we added a whole section on venture capital and in the Latino community. And so with that, Jennifer's going to come up and introduce Rosalie and Marlene. Jose was the third part in the report. Unfortunately, he's not here today, but I just wanted to say, working with the team in terms of Rosalie and Marlene, and Deb especially, in terms of Deb's doesn't like to be given publicity on this, but she is really an incredible member of our project on that. So with that, I'll pass it on to Jennifer. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome. Are you all ready for some research? To dig into the data? Well, good morning. Great to see you all here. My name's Jennifer Garcia. I am the COO for LBAN. What a pleasure to have a full room. I know we have some folks also in our overflow room. I just want to share a little bit about some context of our Soul Summit. It's been over a decade now that we have been doing data around, or doing research around Latino entrepreneurship. And at the beginning, when we started, those were merely data points, a point in time. And as we've gone over year over year, what we've begun to see is consistent themes. And so now it is no longer a data point, a point in time. It has really been the numbers that can contribute to a strong foundation and narrative for Latino entrepreneurship. My hope is that as we go through the discussion around the 11th Annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship, is that each of you are challenged with one question. And that is, how will I respond to the strategic significance of Latino business owners? So I get to sit here today with two amazing leaders here. Dr. Rosalia Zarate, who is the author of the report. She is also the Associate Director of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. And Dr. Marlene Orozco, who is CEO of Stratified Insights. She has also authored several of our past Soul reports. So great knowledge and insight from these two women. Rosalia, I want to start with you. Let's dig in. Let's dig in a little bit and tell us, what are we seeing in this year's report, and what are some of the trending themes that have been consistent over the years?
Yeah, so absolutely. So at a high level, what we're seeing is that Latino-owned businesses are not only growing faster than white-owned businesses across firm and job creation and revenue, which we've previously seen, but they're also driving more net new businesses and jobs than any other major racial ethnic group in the US. So between 2017 and 2023, Latino-owned firms actually grew by 48%, adding more than 180,000 new businesses, while white-owned firms actually declined by 3%, losing over 140,000 businesses. And we see the similar pattern with job creation, where Latino-owned businesses added over 975,000 jobs, nearly 1 million jobs during this time period. But if we take a step back, what we're seeing is only a fraction of the potential. If Latino-owned businesses, let's say, had the same access to capital and opportunities to grow and generate revenue as their peers, they could potentially add more than $2 trillion to the US economy. So this isn't just about equity, but about national economic growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard somebody say, wow. Can you repeat that last opportunity that you mentioned?
A $2.1 trillion opportunity.
2.1 trillion. Marlene, I think you probably have some insights to add to that because there has been a consistent theme over the years. Anything you would add?
Yeah, so having worked on this report for a decade, I started when I was 10 years old. One of the things that really stands out to me, it's not just that Latino-owned businesses are growing. It's that they are growing consistently. We measure this growth, and this growth is accelerating across major indicators. And every year we fold in new census data as it becomes available. And what we are finding is that this growth is not happening just in a period in time, right? This is, as Jennifer mentioned, this is now a trend line that has been building for years. And it's also important to note and double down on the fact that as this growth is accelerating, the opportunity gap that Rosalia mentioned is also growing. So what we're experiencing is momentum in business growth, but also this growing constraint that we really need to pay attention to.
So said otherwise, Latinos are punching above their weight here, right? They are providing outsized economic returns. As it pertains to the data and the research, we put the survey out in the field in the summer, but this year you did a pulse survey at the beginning of the year in January. And what that does is it gives us a more real-time understanding of what is impacting business owners, what's on their mind right now. Tell us a little bit about what you found from that.
Yes, so we're continuing to see shared top challenges amongst the groups like inflation, competition, and economic uncertainty, which you can read more about in the report. But one of the places where experiences diverge between the two groups is around immigration enforcement. And immigration enforcement is something that can impact businesses in several ways, from workforce disruptions to reduced customer foot traffic, leading to overall business instability. And so in 2025, we found that Latino businesses were 3 times more likely to report this as a top challenge compared to 5% of white-owned businesses. And in our recent poll survey, more than 1 in 3 versus 1 in 7 white-owned businesses reported being negatively impacted by immigration enforcement, which I don't necessarily find surprising, just considering what we're seeing in places like Los Angeles and Minnesota, where immigration enforcement is disrupting entire local ecosystems.
I want to ask you, Marlene, because you're down in Southern California in the LA area. Also, you have perspective from past reports where we've studied immigrant-owned businesses. What might you add to these challenges that business owners are reporting today?
Yeah, so that pulse survey is very timely. When I think about, or when I hear immigration enforcement as being a challenge, this really comes into play in 2 ways, in the workforce and also with consumers. And on the workforce side of things, we've seen that in prior SOL reports, Latino-owned businesses, they're more likely to employ other Latinos, and they're also more likely to have Latino leadership. Right? So their workforce, their staff might be directly impacted, or they might be indirectly impacted, right, through their families and their communities. And then on the consumer side, what we're seeing measurable drops in economic activity. There's ongoing research that's out of UCLA that is using cell phone data, and they're tracking the 10 immigration raids that happened in the summer of last year in Los Angeles. And they're finding that even in the days and weeks after those raids, foot traffic in business corridors remains low. So this is absolutely something that we need to continue to measure and quantify to talk about the destabilizing notion of immigration enforcement, not just for individual immigrants, but for small businesses, for the workforce, for local economies.
I think one of the things that I find noteworthy is that in this report, it not only shows the challenges and what we've identified in the past as capital, and those continue to be true, but those challenges are now evolving, where we see macro pressures. We also see policy pressures impacting businesses of all types, and even uniquely to the Latino community and Latino business owners as well. Let's move a little bit. In the report you studied this year, you zoomed in on state analysis, and that gave you an understanding of when we look at states, what are the contributions that Latinos are making at a state level? What are the noteworthy takeaways that you would point to, Rosalia?
Yeah, so when we look at the four most populous states, so that's California, Texas, Florida, and New York, these states have the largest Latino and white populations and the most employer firms. And together, these states actually account for more than 1/3 of the US economy. And for Latino-owned businesses, they are driving net new firm creation in these major states, which means they're growing faster than white-owned businesses in terms of number of firms. So in California and Florida, for example, between 2017 and 2023, we see that more than half of the new firms were actually Latino. And I found New York to be particularly interesting because that state lost more than 15,000 firms between 2017 and 2023, but Latino-owned firms offset roughly 40% of the state's net losses by adding over 6,000 firms. So meaning that without Latinos, there would have been much fewer new businesses, fewer jobs, and just less economic activity overall, especially in states like New York.
Okay, so many of us in this room would probably recognize California, Texas, New York, Florida as Latino hubs. And so we might not be as surprised when we see this outpacing growth. But it's noteworthy to mention that we have found Latinos are outpacing white-owned businesses in 48 states. So you could say that differently, that it's only in 2 states are we underperforming, right? So it is no longer hubs. It is really a national trend here. I think the next question we would say is, all right, well, where is this growth coming from? What are the sectors that are producing this growth? And what would you say to that, Rosalia?
Yeah, so we're seeing that Latinos are growing across diverse sectors, from tech to traditional industries like construction and hospitality. And this year, we found that 1 in 4 Latino-owned businesses are tech companies, so over 25%. That means that they're developing or selling software or hardware compared to 20% of white-owned businesses. And another section where they're seeing rapid growth is in construction. Latino-owned businesses actually grew 86% between 2017 and 2023, while white-owned businesses grew by just 2%. And why I find these 2 sectors particularly interesting is because of what we're seeing right now with tech growth, especially AI. So AI is driving demand for new infrastructure, from data centers to connectivity hubs and other facilities. And so to support that growth, construction and tech need to operate hand in hand because one can't scale without the other. And Latinos are expanding in both.
Expanding in both, expanding across many sectors. Show of hands, who is building in tech right now? Just get a sense of there. 25% Latino businesses are building in tech. I do also want to emphasize this concept of construction growth here. I think when I look at what you mentioned in construction, it is probably the perfect example of a theme that we have seen in the Seoul reports, in that business owners in construction are over-indexing, but they remain small. They tend to remain small on average. If we could get these construction companies fair access to contracts and to capital to grow at similar sizes, we would be adding $200 billion in revenue in construction alone. Now, let me tell you, that's not just specific to construction. That is the theme across all sectors. So there is a major opportunity when we think about how we benefit by growing Latino-owned businesses. Another interesting finding in the report is around international operations. 50% of Latino businesses operating internationally. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so we find that companies that operate internationally actually report higher median profit margins than US-only firms, and that's true for both groups. So operating internationally overall is good for the US economy. I mean, it can help businesses diversify markets and innovate faster as they're exposed to more diverse customers and competitive environments. And so what we're seeing is that Latinos are leading the way in international expansion, operating in all regions of the world, with nearly 50% operating internationally, and often much earlier than their white counterparts. So that tells us that they're not waiting to hit a certain milestone to go international. Instead, they are thinking strategically about growth from day one. And they're doing it profitably despite operating young and smaller firms, and while also navigating that added complexity of foreign policies and regulations on top of what they're having to navigate in the US around regulations and other policy changes. And we have some other spotlights in the report that highlight how different entrepreneurs are navigating the landscape. So I invite you all to also take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marlene, just any thoughts that you would add to that? I know that past reports have also studied immigrant-owned businesses, so imagine there's a correlation there.
Absolutely. So what's really powerful about the Stanford and LBAN survey is that it's a large survey. It's a large sample, so you're able to slice and dice the data in a number of ways to really understand and see who Latino entrepreneurs are. And prior Sol reports, and as have other research studies shown, that immigrants are more likely to start businesses compared to US-born individuals. And so, with immigration comes natural ties, global ties, and connections that I think are also fueling what we are seeing that Rosalia shared. Our prior research has also showed that if you are an import business and or an export business, this is highly correlated to growth and scale. And so when you combine those two factors, it's a clear pathway to growth.
So what I'm hearing is, one, it's a competitive advantage, but also it brings this added layer of complexity and perhaps making them more susceptible to international trade regulations, policies, in today's world, tariffs. So all of that comes, when you put all of that together, it is a much more complex environment for business owners. Let's move to one of the themes that we have talked about over the years, and that is the persistent challenge of access to capital. We have studied that in different shapes throughout the course of doing the Sol report. Tell us a little bit, Rosalia, what are we seeing this year? And particularly, how has that challenge evolved as companies have grown?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the big takeaways is that as firms start seeking larger amounts of capital, that's where we start seeing more pronounced differences between the two groups. So for example, when Latinos apply for larger loans or credit amounts, like over $1 million, only 22% of them receive the full amount they requested compared to 45% of white-owned businesses. So that means that Latino entrepreneurs are getting their full funding at roughly half the rate of white-owned businesses at a critical time when they're trying to grow. And now with the recent changes in the financial landscape that have occurred in the last year, like the SBA loan requirements mandating 100% US ownership, we're seeing additional layers of challenges with Latino-owned businesses. So they're being disproportionately affected by these changes, and they've stated that they've had to delay or scale back their growth as well, so all of this could add to these compounding potential negative effects on their financing journey.
Yeah. Marlene, thoughts on the access to capital gap?
I think it's important to emphasize what Rosalia just said. She said that nearly 1/4 of Latino-owned businesses that are scaled or generating $1 million in annual revenue, which by many measures is a measure of success, these businesses are having a hard time accessing the capital that they need. And it is at this revenue threshold of between 1 million to 5 million where businesses really need that capital to go beyond their proof of concept and their initial traction to scale, right? I mean, this is where LBAN's programming comes as an intervention. If you think about, Jerry's exercise of closing your eyes and doubling your revenue and doubling your growth, this is really where the dreaming happens, in that $1 to $5 million revenue. And if you're not getting the funding that you need, that's certainly going to stall some of that growth that we're seeing amongst that segment.
Absolutely. Well said. Professor Foster alluded to this, but this is the first year in our report that we really dove deep into exploring the venture capital landscape and understanding where VC funding is flowing. And I do want to call out again what Rosalia mentioned, that 26% of Latino-owned businesses are in tech. So for us, it was extremely important to begin to understand and have a deeper understanding around equity capital. Marlene, you led that segment for us. Anything that you want to highlight for the audience here?
Yeah, so we know that 1 in 4 Latino businesses are in tech, and we wanted to understand what their financing experience looks like, and we did so by looking closely at their access to VC. We created a custom database or data set to be able to look at this closely, and one of the biggest gaps that I want you to take away from that section of the report is that the biggest gap for Latino startups are at the early stages. And there is a lot of VC activity happening in 2021, and Latino founders were able to get in on some of those deals. But since that peak in the VC ecosystem, for Latinos at the pre-seed and early stage, their funding has declined by 80%. And this has incredible ramifications downstream if we're not funding Latino startups. So that's something that I want you to take away from that section. And of course, we can't talk about tech without talking about AI. And so what this figure here shows is the share of Latino startups in AI, and the red line is their share of deal value. So what this is showing you is that Latinos are starting businesses in AI, that blue trend line, but their share value is lower, right? So they're receiving smaller checks. In a perfect world, those lines would be overlapping, and you would see parity in terms of activity and also capital allocation, but that's not the case today.
I find this to be one of the biggest tensions in the report, in that we are seeing Latinos with higher representation, higher productivity in the tech space, but we're not seeing the equivalent access to capital in this area as well, particularly in the pre-seed and seed. And to me, what that's showing is we are at a potential of a shrinking economy, because effectively what we're doing is we are suffocating 25% of the fastest growing segment of business creators if they're not getting access to funding at this level. Which I then point to the question again, for all of you in the VC space, for all of you that are investors and check writers, how will you respond to the strategic significance of Latino entrepreneurship? We are coming to the end of our discussion here with our panelists. We just had, this is just a teaser for you all, so I encourage you to go back and to read the report. But as we come to a close, I want to give our panelists one final thought. Marlene, I'll start with you, and then Rosalia.
So this report's been ongoing for 11 years. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that this body of work has created a consistent data source so that we can better understand who Latino entrepreneurs are. We went from having very limited insights into Latino entrepreneurship to now being able to track growth and outcomes and trends, emerging trends like AI and tariffs. And so, what this research has really done is create a shared evidence base that really allows us to move from awareness and understanding who Latino entrepreneurs are and what their needs are, and move into action.
Very good. Rosalia.
Yes, so we know that Latinos make up roughly 1 in 5 Americans. They are the youngest demographic group and among the fastest growing groups, which is also reflected in the metrics we shared today, and they're increasingly launching tech companies, going internationally, and they demonstrate a growth-oriented mindset. And so I think a key question that we can also walk away with is how can different support systems, from financial to policy systems, keep pace with this rapid growth? Because even with the structural challenges from COVID to just the policy changes now, Latino entrepreneurs are adapting and at times emerging even stronger. So again, investing in their success isn't just about equity, but it's a $2.1 trillion economic opportunity.
Very good. And what I would say from the LBAN perspective, somebody's right on time, I'm wrapping up, is our solution to catalyze growth and to overcome challenges is through the ecosystem. By you being here today, you are part of that ecosystem. There are business owners in the room, there's capital providers in the room, there's subject matter experts, other ecosystem builders. It is important that you are here and that you are active and that you are contributing to the ecosystem. I want to emphasize our economic opportunity. If we can find, fund, and support these businesses to grow and scale, just imagine what could happen. So with that, I want to say thank you to our panelists and thank you all for being here.
Man, it is our really distinct pleasure to have 2 incredible leaders of our country. The first I'm going to talk about is John Levin. He's the 13th president of Stanford University, serving here since August of 2024. He was previously the dean of the business school here from 16 to 24. And that's where we got to know him well, and he got to know LBAN and SLAVE very, very well. So he's an incredible supporter. And so we're just very, very grateful to him for his continued support. He's the first alum from Stanford since 1968 to serve as president. So he understands all this well. We were just talking backstage about dress. He goes, business casual here is as long as you wear pants, it doesn't matter. But anyway, he's a graduate of Stanford, Oxford, MIT, incredible credentials, and we are so fortunate to have him as the president of this university. Please welcome John Levin. Then our special guest is an executive with JP Morgan Chase, a career of 19 plus years. She's originally from Nicaragua and has had an immigrant journey herself. Okay, how many Nicaraguenses are here? Okay. But when we asked Jamie Dimon, who would be good, because he couldn't make it, who would be a great representative, he goes, Carolina Giannicelli, and she is the current global head of diversity, opportunity, and inclusion at JP Morgan Chase. She oversees all the BRGs and executive forums as well, and just is a real strong proponent of the kinds of things that we're doing here at Stanford and with LBAN. So with that, please welcome Carolina Giannicelli.
Okay, so it's great to have a chance to be here, and Carolina, thank you for joining us. Victor, thanks for that lovely introduction. In fairness, I was congratulating Victor on his wonderful Stanford tie, actually, so that definitely fits into the acceptable attire at Stanford. So we're going to have a chance to have a discussion with Carolina, and I'm really pleased that you're here. I thought maybe just to start off, just give you a chance to introduce yourself. You've had a long career at JP Morgan that has spanned sort of every aspect of one of the world's great financial institutions. Maybe just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about how you went through that career and how you've ended up in this new global role.
Thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. And I don't usually correct introductions that make me appear older. But I've actually been at the firm close to 30 years, so it has been a long time. And yeah, like President Levin was saying, I have had many different roles at the firm. Leaving Nicaragua as a small child, growing up in Costa Rica, I went to an American school there, and then on to Babson College, which is a business-focused school in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And right out of Babson, I was recruited by the firm JP Morgan Chase to join the investment bank. So I started out in mergers and acquisitions, debt capital markets. I covered a few different industry groups, essentially providing access to capital and M&A to Latin American companies. I then transitioned over to the buy side of the market when I moved over to the private bank, where I spent 20 years working with wealthy families and individuals, helping them preserve and grow their wealth, and along the way helping build out that business. I built the high net worth business for Latin America, as well as a few other initiatives there. And it was during the pandemic in 2020, when I was hitting my 25-year mark at the firm, that I received a phone call to see if I might be interested in leading the firm's $30 billion commitment to help close the racial wealth gap. As an immigrant, as a woman, having personally experienced the very real obstacles that exist when you are not, first generation to go to college or to be in corporate America, to actually know how the system works, to know the unspoken rules of, the capital markets and certainly, Wall Street. I felt that it was a duty and an honor to take that on. So I did. And I ran that for 4 years and then went back to help build one of our wealth businesses. But a few months ago was again tapped on the shoulder to have a conversation about leading our global diversity, opportunity, and inclusion practice at the firm. And again, similar thought process, right? Probably not one of the most coveted roles these days, but no less important. And I think that the decisions we make today will have ramifications for many, many years to come. And, I was taught to, run towards the fire. And so I'm actually having a great time doing this work at the firm. It really is about casting a wide net and making sure that we are making the firm a place where anybody, regardless of their background, can thrive. If they are talented, if they are willing to put in the sweat equity, which never goes away. AI won't make the sweat equity go away. Spoiler alert. There's no substitute for hard work. And also if you believe in what we're doing, because we do have, we take our principles very seriously at the firm. We believe that we have a role to play in making the world a better place. And that obviously taking care of our clients and being there for them in good times and bad is our primary purpose. And of course, we can only achieve that if we have diverse skill sets, perspectives, helping us make better decisions for our clients, and obviously bankers that represent the communities that we serve.
Carolina, so I want to get to your current role and some of the things you're doing, but I want to just go back to your background for 1 minute. I was really struck, and we were just talking about it backstage, that you studied business and finance in school, but also art history.
Yes.
And I'm curious, one, why you did integrate those, because you wrote a master's thesis about David Rockefeller's art collection at Chase Bank. So that was an interesting intersection. But I'm curious how that informed your career, and maybe if it says anything about the skill set that people need in today's world.
I believe it does. So the decision, I didn't have a premonition or anything like that. It wasn't so strategic. It was really pure love, like literally for the love of art. I decided to bypass an MBA and get a master's degree in art history, which I did on a part-time basis because I had a full-time job. I was actually covering Brazil at the time, so those long flights were all my master's degree was sort of read and written on planes back and forth to Brazil and the Southern Cone. But I discovered, I grew up in a home of art collectors. My parents collected art, but they never talked about it. It was just everywhere, and I just sort of saw it, and I just kind of took it for granted. And then when I came to the United States, I actually discovered art history, and the fact that when you look at a painting, there are like so many layers of meaning. It's like a time capsule of the place and time of what was going on in the world when the artist, conceived of that idea, how it was created, and it's also a biographical time capsule of the artist, themselves. And so I just thought it was the most beautiful way of actually understanding humanity and history through the lens of art. And over the years, art has actually helped me really understand that there are so many different ways to look at the same object. And if you think about Picasso and why he just changed the game, it was how he actually captured that simultaneously on one plane. Like if you look at a Cubist work of art, you are looking, let's say, at this table with these flowers and this bottle. On the same plane, you might see 20 different angles or points of view of these objects right here. And that just stuck with me as like, wait, I can apply that to everything. I can apply that to how I respond to an opportunity with a client. I can apply that to how I lead and how I understand the different people on my team. This is how the world works. There are so many different points of view, and they're all valid. The question is, what are you solving for? And what's your process to at least determine the 3 or 4 that may end up being the direction you pick. So it has completely shaped my thinking, and I do think that in an age where AI is essentially transforming the workplace, where leaders are going to lead people and agents, we were talking about that. These inherently human qualities will be even more important. The ability to be discerning, the ability to really understand problem statements with a lot more depth, to know what to do with information. I think information is now abundant. The deficit is in trusted discernment and really understanding the so what of all of that. So I think art has completely shaped how I approach that.
I love that. So now you've come into this new role. You're 3 months in. You're in one of the senior leadership positions at one of the world's most important companies. It's a time when there's been a big backlash in the U.S. against DEI programming, and yet there's lots of concern about inequality and access to economic opportunity here and in many of the other countries that you operate in. How are you thinking about your priorities for your role and what you're going to focus on and how you're going to sort of define the vision for the firm in the next couple of years?
That's a really important question. So I'll kind of unpack that in kind of, I think there's 2 parallel conversations here. The first is to actually share what DOI means to us and what it doesn't mean. For us, the work is about reducing barriers, not standards. And the precondition for all of that is to really believe in the merits of inclusion. So inclusion is the vessel. It's the tip of the spear. It's really understanding the value of inviting different voices around the table, of being open-minded and letting more ideas in versus less. It's recognizing that different skill sets applied in different scenarios can drive better outcomes and lead to more intelligent and better decisions. So the premise is inclusion. Once you have inclusion, diversity can happen. You can't have it the other way. And diversity simply represents this desire to cast a really, really wide net because nobody has cornered the market on good ideas. You need to really hear from different cognitive skill sets to get to the right answer. And so that's what it means to me. It's interesting because the title is DOI. I actually primarily talk about inclusion and the power of diversity. Opportunity just refers to our desire to make opportunities available, broadly. But we don't solve for outcomes. We solve for the top of the funnel. And then, once you have that diverse playing field, of course, completely based on merit and qualifications, people will, move ahead, get the job, get the promotion, et cetera. So that's one thing. Now, if I translate those principles to, what LBAN and SLAY and the work that this wonderful organization does to really understand the state of Hispanic entrepreneurship, you say, okay, so we have a scenario here where we have a disproportionately small percentage of capital flowing to Latino Hispanic businesses. How do we approach that? And I think the principles of casting a wide net and lowering barriers, not standards, applies completely, right? So as a firm, our approach is to provide access to resources, tools, guidance, advice to help small business owners and entrepreneurs navigate the different pathways to capital, which might look differently and actually do look different for every business at different points in their development. And again, in a world where trust is at a deficit, I think the most important thing that our firm can bring to the table to this problem is trusted advice from our bankers and our specialists. And I will say to every business owner here and listening, the most important thing you can do for your growth over the years is to actually identify people that you trust and build relationships. Again, AI and technology are not going to replace the power of trusted relationships. Relationships are everything in business. Products, services, they exist everywhere. I mean, I'd like to think JP Morgan Chase has a wonderfully differentiated products, but at the end of the day, it's knowing how to use them when they apply and what is the right, what lever to pull at the right time, depending on where you are. And then the other conversation we were having that I think matters, going back to this problem statement about access to capital is, and I do think your research does this to an important degree, is to sort of not just talk about broad-based difficulties of Latino-owned businesses to access capital, but actually double-click further to actually understand the types of businesses that we're talking about. Because there are certain types of risk capital, like venture capital, for instance, that are going to be much better aligned or more, realistically aligned to businesses in certain industries, like innovation economy, like fast-growing, accelerated growth, high-return businesses. So it's not just that they're Hispanic-owned. I would say, what are the actual industries and what are the barriers in those specific areas? Because I do think, interrogating the problem statement further will reveal, better pathways to how we address this problem.
You picked up on actually many of the key parts of the SLAY program that we've run here for years. Everyone just saw the research about both the depth of Latino-owned entrepreneurial businesses in the United States, the breadth of it, and the growth, but also the smaller scale. And it's deeply imprinted in my brain by Jerry Porras, who started the program here, that our scaling program, educational program, which many people in the audience went through, one of the big themes is doing business with each other. And one of the points of pride in that program is how many people end up doing business across the program or across cohorts of the program. Let me ask you a little more about the scaling. The folks who come to the SLAY program, often the reason they've ended up coming to a program at Stanford is they really have an ambition not just to maintain their business, but they want to grow it. And are there things that you've seen over time, or JP Morgan has seen over time, that have been keys to success for small businesses that have successfully been able to grow? And maybe many of these businesses that we get into this program are not the venture-backed business. Some of them might be, but many of them are not the venture-backed Sand Hill Road businesses. They're businesses that have to rely on loans and other forms of capital to grow. What do you view as what advice would you have for those folks?
I think that regardless of your business, the more tech-forward your operating model is, the more likely you will be to be able to scale your business. And I think that's sort of like mission critical. And we see this through our own efforts to build an inclusive supply chain at the firm. So we spend a lot of time with smaller businesses to help them plug into our supply chain. And what we find is that a lot of these very well, really good businesses are sort of kept out of these sort of larger mandate, higher scale contracts because they might not have the right resources to be cybersecurity certified or have the right level of insurance, et cetera. And oftentimes these are needs that have technological solutions, that underpin. I also think it has to do with how you engage with your market and consumers, depending on the business. So I do think that whether it's a business that's in retail or fashion or transportation. Certainly, innovation economy businesses, they're sort of tech forward to begin with. But the more integrated technology solutions are to scale, to run efficiencies, I think that is a critical element to scale in today's world.
How much are you, I mean, we're at Stanford, we have a lot of students here who are thinking about careers and kind of what are the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the future. You're one of the largest employers in the country. How are you thinking about the future workplace skills that are needed, and both in general and in particular in your job, looking at having an inclusive workforce?
That's a great question. Actually, we have a 4-pillar sort of strategy in global diversity, opportunity, and inclusion. And one of our core areas of focus is how we preserve and strengthen a culture of inclusion throughout this AI transformation. And we have more questions than answers, right now. We are at the table with our key decision makers to put this issue front and center as we go on our sprints to transform essentially how we deliver our products, our services to our clients. So having AI governance and being intentional about that and having the right voices around the table matters. And making the distinction between voices and votes, right? So we're not going to make these decisions by consensus because we need to move very, very quickly. But those decision makers need to be very, very proximate to different points of view. So we're solving for that. And these are conversations we're having at the operating committee level. We're also focusing on what we can control, because I don't think anybody can claim they know how this thing's going to look like exactly in 6 months or 12 months. I mean, this is how quickly things are moving. But what do we know? We know that the more transparent we are, the better. So we are very transparent with our employees about potential impacts. We're also very proactively providing resources and training to empower employees to integrate AI solutions into their day-to-day work. And the work to be done essentially comes down to how are we able to create an operating model where more employees are able to participate in the transformation. Every time there is a massive transformation, and I think this would apply to everyone in this room, there's 10 to 15% of the population that just dives in head first. They're the architects. They're leading the way, and those folks, are going to continue to lead. There's sort of a middle group that kind of waits and sees and stands back and sort of takes stocks of what's going on, and they might participate, to some degree. And then there's the skeptics, right? The 10% that sort of dig in their feet. I've been doing this way forever. It works for me. Why will it stop working now? You certainly don't want to be in that 10%, and you probably should try to not be in that sort of middle belly either. And we're proactively having these conversations with our employees. So we're transparent about the fact that things are changing, and we're just empowering people as much as we can in an equitable way. And then, of course, there's sort of the table stakes, like seeking out biases in models and things like that, which we have been doing for many, many years. But the pace of new development will require that we sort of up the ante in how we do that as well.
You've had a career where you came into a large organization, and you've spent 30 years, you've been all over the organization, and now you're at the very senior level. Do you think many people in the audience have had a different career trajectory where they've gone off in an entrepreneurial path? And I'm curious if we were to be having this discussion in, say, another 30 years, when many of our students will be at your career stage, how do you think that will look? How do you think they'll be less likely to go on your career trajectory and more likely to go on an entrepreneurial career trajectory? Do you think it'll be kind of similar to the last years? Do you see any changes ahead for the
Oh my gosh.
workforce?
That is the question, huh?
It is a hard question. That's why I'm curious to get your answer to it.
Yeah. Well, it is. Look, this is just an opinion. Obviously, I do not claim to know the answer for sure or have a crystal ball. I think that entrepreneurship will. I don't think entrepreneurship's going away. Right, I think it's human nature, and if anything, there are going to be business owners and entrepreneurs will be more enabled to bring stuff to market. With technology. I mean, technology is just there is a democratization process happening with AI too. I mean, with Claude Code on your phone, the assets, the things that you can create, the more you use it, it's amazing. And I've interviewed business owners that have one human employee and like 12 agents, and they are running a fully functioning business. So I think that being an entrepreneur is not going to go away. I do think that the skill sets that will really matter are actually those that bring us closer to our innately human traits. Because human nature is not going away. And I think the more you participate in, activities and situations that help you build human connections, that sort of develop empathy, develop curiosity, really gets you close to problem statements. I think that's the key thing. A solution, when you don't have clarity for your problem statements, you're going to have a bunch of solutions looking for problems. And that's not going to help anyone. So I think the closer and the more we embrace the things like art, I would argue, or literature that really double down on those uniquely human experiences, I think the better position we will be to leverage the tools out there and technology to fix real problems. Because we'll always have to fix real problems. They're just going to look different. And some of those real problems will be solved by entrepreneurs. Some will be solved by companies. I'm starting to see research that AI has increased productivity. And so people are just trying to do more with the same amount of time. It's not like no one's doing less because they're more productive. It's like, I can do this faster, so now I get to do these 3 things. So, I think the jury's still out, honestly, about how ultimately the productivity gains will shape. But I think that what we know for sure is that embracing AI and more than just as a passing interest, but like really developing a decent skill set with these tools will only help, whether you work in a company or you're an entrepreneur.
I love that answer. And there's a famous, just to pick up on that, there's one of the famous studies that was done here at the Stanford Business School maybe 25 years ago by a faculty member named Eddie Lazier was a study about what are the skills that are distinctive to entrepreneurs. And it was a study of Stanford students, actually, that he used to get at this. And the interesting thing about this study is what he found in this study was that entrepreneurs are generalists, above and beyond anything else. They have to be able to solve all kinds of problems. And so what he showed with the students was that they tended to be the students who'd taken the broadest array of different classes. They might have some deep knowledge in a few places, but they were really good at having breadth. That allowed them to be adaptable, to solve different types of problems, to be able to interact with other people, to solve sales, finance, right? Or whatever the problem was. And that was the distinctive characteristic of entrepreneurs. And just hearing you talk makes me think that maybe that's going to be a distinctive characteristic of everyone who's successful in the workplace going forward. They're going to be able to span these different domains as you've done in your career. So thank you so much for this introduction. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
give another round of applause for President Levin, Carolina Giannicelli. How many of you are fired up right now? I have a few remarks, and I want to make sure that you are set and ready for the second half of today. A few thank yous. Professor Foster, thank you for spearheading and leading the research alongside Rosalia Zarate. We wonderfully appreciate the opportunity to work with you both. Deb Whitman, I want to thank you and your team for helping put this entire event together. Here's a couple notes for all of you in the audience, because you're probably asking, what is next? On your phone, you can download the app that will guide you through all of the panel discussions, as well as the location where you can find them. If you're not ready to download an app, you could flip over your name badge. There's a QR code that will show you the same information. You can get all the details behind the next panel discussions. We're just getting started. The next couple hours this afternoon are going to be fantastic conversations. We've curated speakers and topics that we know are relevant to this audience, to business owners, so you don't want to miss out. In addition, we are closing the day with our Soul Gala this evening. So we have a few more seats left. If you have, I see the phones going up, you're telling me you're the ones that have not got your ticket for the Soul Summit, for the Soul Gala. Feel free to join us tonight. There's a QR code that you can register there. Lastly, Arturo mentioned this in his comments. If you are a business owner who knows a business owner that wants to grow and scale their company, we welcome recommendations. You are our mouthpiece. You are our extended marketing team. So we lean on you to help us reach those companies that need to be part of our network. And so we welcome any referrals or recommendations there. With that, that brings us to a close to our formal programming for the 11th Annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship Summit. Would you just stand up and give a big applause to the rest of the room, because it is all of you that makes it possible. Thank you, everyone.